I expected to find a lot of duck-billed dinosaurs and triceratops, which were already well known there. And we ended up finding a whole bunch of T-Rexes, which was very surprising. We probably can compare a sauropod dinosaur to basically any not very smart insect. And as we were walking out the door, she said, "Oh, by the way, do you know what these things are?" And she held out her hand, and in her hand were baby dinosaur bones. I'm calling for Steven Spielberg, and Steven wants to know if you would consider working on the movie Jurassic Park as the scientific advisor. I was working at a famous university, and I was working in a museum. Didn't matter to me how much I was getting paid. And my father, he was still telling his friends, well, Jack got a job, but, he's lazy. Here I was flunking science and winning science fairs. So I won 3 science fairs. My sophomore, junior, and senior years. At the same time, I was getting D's in science, F's in English.
If you Google famous paleontologists, Jack Horner will appear in the short list of legendary scientists alongside Charles Darwin and Richard Owen. Jack discovered the first evidence of dinosaur colonial nesting, the first evidence of parental care among dinosaurs, and the first dinosaur embryos. His work led to the discovery of the soft tissue of dinosaurs that is more than 65 million years old. You probably already realized from the intro that he was involved in the Jurassic Park movies, but you should also know that the main character, Dr. Alan Grant, was based on Jack Horner. The most shocking thing about Jack's accomplishment is that he's dyslexic, who barely graduated from high school and couldn't graduate from college due to his learning disability. In fact, during his college years, he was routinely on academic probations, as he failed every class, including paleontology. Despite that, he reached the pinnacle of his scientific career, received a MacArthur Fellowship, and an Honorary Doctorate of Science from the University of Montana, the very university that put him on probations. But before we start, I'd like to ask you for a quick favor. Please subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments section, and let's continue growing this community together. So my preparation for this interview basically shattered my understanding of dinosaurs. I always thought that the T-Rexes particularly were these apex predators, and the way they were depicted in Jurassic Park and some other semi-documentaries, whatever, if you can call them documentaries. But apparently, when I watched your interviews and your speeches, you think they might be scavengers, right? And they might be colorful and probably had feathers.
Certainly my opinion. We don't really know very much about dinosaurs. They're extinct. We have their skeletons. We have a few other things, but we try to make educated guesses as to what they were like. And T-Rex, if you look at the skeleton of a T-Rex and compare it to something like Velociraptor, the skeleton is very different. If you think about an apex predator should have all of the characteristics we expect for something that could run fast, grab things. There are a lot of things that it should have. And T-Rex doesn't have hardly any of them. But Velociraptor does. And so, if we just compare the two skeletons, we can see that T-Rex is doing something very different than Velociraptor. Studies have been done that it really can't run fast. Maybe it could walk fast, but it couldn't run fast. It doesn't have arms for grabbing anything. Mm-hmm. It's going to grab something, it has to grab it with its mouth. And unless it's grabbing really tiny little animals, nothing likes to be grabbed. So everything's going to fight. And, I don't care how strong your teeth are, no matter how you grab a triceratops, you're not going to hold it in your mouth very long. I mean, it's just, it needs to make sense too. And so when we look at T-Rex, it's got bone-crushing teeth, which it does not have to have if it's the first thing there. If it does the killing and it's the first organism to reach this carcass of a dead animal, the last thing it needs are bone-crushing teeth. Bone crushing is something you do after you've gotten the meat all off of it. And so, having bone-crushing teeth kind of defeats the purpose. Velociraptor doesn't have bone-crushing teeth. It has meat-slicing teeth because it's probably the first thing there, right? It does the killing and it eats meat. It doesn't dismember the carcass. There's no reason to. You you eat the flesh and that's it. T-Rex has the capability and the power of the jaws that could literally just tear the skeleton apart and crush the bones. And it, those are characteristics we see in scavenging animals. And besides that, T-Rex has a huge olfactory lobe in its brain. It's very much like turkey vultures and not like bloodhounds. It's an accumulation of characters. It's not just one thing. And, people say, well, we found a duck-billed dinosaur with a bite mark in it. And I say, well, that's great. So what? I mean, a bite mark doesn't say much of anything other than, so maybe T-Rex did take down a sick animal once in a while. I mean, or a slow animal or a sleepy animal or, whatever. That doesn't take away from all of the other characteristics that it has.
So you mentioned that they didn't run fast, and because I have no idea how to tell that by looking at the skeleton. What is the characteristics on the skeleton, on the bones?
John Hutchison, a paleontologist who does biomechanics, looked at, compared T-Rex with birds and other animals, and his conclusion was that they're just not, proportionally built for running fast. You can kind of see it just in the leg proportions. I mean, if you look at the thigh bone, the shin bone, and the foot bones, right? So those three units. In animals like birds, like ostriches that run fast, they have a short femur, a long tibia, and then, they have long, legs as well, long feet. It's neither here nor there, I don't think. But the point is, the femur to tibia ratio, the femur is much shorter than the tibia. Like us, I mean, think about us. We're half legs, right? I mean, basically our height.
Yeah.
Half of us are legs, and we can't run fast. I mean, we probably the only animal we can outrun that's our own size is like a Galapagos turtle. But the reason is our femur to tibia ratio, the femur and tibia are about the same length. We're adapted for long distance walking. We could probably outwalk almost any animal, but we're not going to outrun hardly anything. So that leg proportion, the leg proportion is, I think, says a lot. And T-Rex has a leg proportion pretty much like we do. I think it was adapted for long distance walking. You look at Velociraptor and it has shorter feet. Its femur is short and its tibia is long, and it's adapted for running. So again, it's just, comparative anatomy.
What about its short arms, or what did they use it for?
I think they were vestigial. I think that they were losing them over time because they just didn't need them. And they may have used them in some kind of sexual, display, as we see in some people hypothesize. But a colleague of mine, Kevin Padian, has suggested that, T-Rex is battling over a carcass, might have nipped at each other, and they may have been selecting away from having long arms just because they didn't require them. But in either case, I think that, there's a strong force, just doesn't even have to be strong. I mean, they just, a scavenging animal that comes to a carcass or even takes a sick animal, whatever, doesn't really need arms. I mean, it just needs a powerful jaw
The idea with feathers, is it because they are very much related to birds?
Yes, birds are descended from saurischian dinosaurs, from theropods. As far as we know, we have feather imprints for Velociraptor and a lot of the little birds, little dinosaurs. We have found evidence of feathers in the ostrich-like dinosaurs. And so, just again, by association, and if you have it in the ostrich-like dinosaurs and find it in Velociraptor-like dinosaurs, it's likely, ubiquitous across all of the taxa of meat-eating dinosaurs. Certainly, no reason not to expect to see it in T-Rex somewhere. Maybe when they're really young, as insulation, since we know that dinosaurs were warm-blooded in some sense. Maybe not, probably not endothermic homeotherms like us ourselves, but at least endothermic heterotherms, generating heat internally and keeping a body temperature probably not tightly constrained like us, but maybe, able to over a stretch of numbers, maybe like a turkey vulture, maybe 30 degrees or so.
What do we know about the intelligence of them in general, and maybe if we have some information about the intelligence or some guesses, which one you think were most intelligent?
If it comes down to, measuring intelligence the way we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We do it by brain size. So brain to body ratios is basically how we think about it. The animals like Velociraptor and Troodon definitely have the highest brain to body ratio. The sauropods, the long neck dinosaurs, I mean, they're just pathetic. I mean, I keep hoping that they really do have a second brain, a large ganglion in their pelvis, because quite frankly, if they don't, we probably can compare a sauropod dinosaur to basically any not very smart insect. I don't know. There's not much we can say about them.
Being that big and that unintelligent, it's pretty scary. By the way, what's in an evolution caused them to grow to such big sizes?
Size is a funny thing. I mean, if you're in an environment where there's lots of food and over, a relatively large distance, and you don't have a lot of competition, the natural thing is what we call an arms race, right? The trees, if they have plenty of room and lots of nutrients for themselves, they're going to continually get bigger as a defense from the plant-eating animals. And as they get bigger, if there's, if the environment is good, the plant-eating animals will get bigger as well to try to catch up. And the meat-eating dinosaurs are going to have to get bigger as well in order to eat the plant-eating dinosaurs. So as long as the environment stays pretty steady and there is, a lot of resources, gigantism is pretty straightforward. And we see the opposite, if we look on an island, if we suddenly, or even over time, isolate a population and begin reducing the environment that it's in, we see dwarfism. We see many cases of that. And, a lot of people say, well, why aren't there gigantic mammals? Well, quite frankly, there have been some big mammals over time, not a lot of them. About the time that we would expect to see them, we have the Ice Age. And of course, the Ice Age, most of the northern continents are covered with ice over a very large area. So we get big animals, we get big elephants, and we get big other kinds of animals, but not to the size of dinosaurs, because the environment probably just wasn't conducive to it at that time.
You've been a paleontologist for many years. What has changed in your understanding and in general understanding of dinosaurs over your career? What was the complete 180? Like, I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, when I was a little kid, it was understood that dinosaurs were good reptiles and birds, were birds and completely different. And dinosaurs drugged their tails, and sauropods lived in the water. And I went to the University of Montana, the paleontologist there. I said I wanted to be a dinosaur paleontologist. And he just shook his head and he says, we know everything there is to know about dinosaurs. They were just big green reptiles and they went extinct. And he says, we study mammals here. I had to learn mammals. I had to learn fossil mammals. And I kept thinking about dinosaurs. And when I got my first job at Princeton University, I branched off into dinosaurs because that was what interested me. But, at that time, people thought they knew everything. They didn't realize there were any questions left about dinosaurs. And so, as you know, since then, we've learned an awful lot of new things about dinosaurs. It mostly came about because, it was initiated by John Ostrom at Yale University, who, first realized that all these people mounting dinosaurs over the years had, basically done it wrong, that dinosaurs didn't drag their tails. And, he also found Deinonychus, which gave us the first evidence that birds were the descendants of dinosaurs.
What did he do differently? And like, is it his finding that changed the understanding of dinosaurs, or it's just completely different methodology he uses?
First off, he found Deinonychus, and Deinonychus, basically changed everything because you could see that it couldn't possibly drag its tail. It has these really long extensions of the vertebrae that keep it rigid. From there, I think he started looking at other dinosaurs and realizing that people had actually taken similar bones off of the skeletons in order to get them to drag their tails. They'd broken the tails. They'd taken the ossified tendons off of them. I mean, they just started with the preconceived idea that dinosaurs drug their tails because lizards do. And when he started thinking about how duckbill dinosaurs have these lattices of ossified tendons running down their back, it's just not possible for them to have drugged their tails.
What's the significance in dragging tails? Does it mean that it's just an oversized lizard?
That was the preconceived idea, yeah. So
got it. Okay.
Even when the first bipedal dinosaur was recognized, it was Hadrosaurus. It was found in New Jersey. They put it up, they mounted it standing in an erect position, very, very much like a person, and then having this long tail that, was on the ground. I mean, it was ridiculous looking, but,
yeah,
they just didn't know. And it was a reptile. And, the skeleton, it's funny because the skeleton of Hadrosaurus is in Philadelphia. And when I first went to Princeton, it was one of the first places I went. I wanted to see the Hadrosaurus skeleton. And it wasn't put together at the time. They had dismantled it. They knew it was wrong, and they piled it in a corner. And I took all the bones out. And the funny thing about it was they were all painted green. They had painted the plaster green, and they had painted the bones green. I mean, at the time, they thought they were reptiles, and reptiles should be green. So the whole thing was green.
So you had this professor who told you that they study mammals, right?
Right.
There was this understanding that everything about dinosaurs is already known. Like, why were you so fascinated with them? Why did you decide to continue learning more?
I was born and raised in Montana. I was in a place where not very far from where I lived, I could find dinosaur remains. And I had ventured into Canada, which was not very far from where I lived. And my mother had driven me up there on several occasions. They had a big dinosaur park up there. They had a zoo, an island in a river in Calgary, Alberta. And on the island was a zoo and a prehistoric park. There was all these concrete dinosaurs. And I loved them. And not far from Calgary is a place that became a park. It's Dinosaur Provincial Park. And I used to go there all the time. And I was just fascinated by, all of the potential, finding dinosaurs, seeing them in the ground, seeing the big concrete ones. I don't know. Mammals didn't interest me much because, you could go see the zoo.
I've read that you were 8 years old when you found your first dinosaur bone.
I was, yes.
Where did you find it, and how did you know it's a dinosaur bone? Because it looked like a bone, like a stone.
Well, my father was a gravel man. He was in the sand and gravel business, so he knew quite a bit about geology. And he remembered when he was young, he remembered riding his horse across the prairie and seeing big bones sticking out. When he knew that I was interested in dinosaurs, took me back to his old ranch, and we wandered around until we found some. And, there was no way I could know it was a dinosaur bone at the time, but I know now it is because I know where it came from.
It sounds like Montana to dinosaurs is like Middle East to oil. Like, is it like, are they like sticking out from everywhere? Is it the story?
That's pretty much true, yeah.
Why is that? Why Montana?
Well, it's just the right place in the right time. Dinosaurs lived everywhere in the world. They lived and died everywhere. But They went extinct 65 million years ago. And so a lot has happened to the Earth since then. There's been mountain building, there's been, sea rise, lowering, just all sorts of things have happened. And so the right age rock is either buried under thousands of feet of younger rock, or it's been weathered away, or in the case of Montana, it's at the surface of the ground now. There are certain places where it just happens to be the right time now to find them.
And in terms of what kind of dinosaurs they are, you said all over the earth, right? Like when I think of mammals, they are different in each continent. But with dinosaurs, are we seeing like more of T-Rexes in Montana and more of the...
Can you see your background?
Yeah.
You got the Earth back there, right?
Yep.
You got to remember that dinosaurs were on Earth for 155 million years. And in that amount of time, the continents changed their positions. And when dinosaurs first evolved, all the continents were together. And so once they split apart, the dinosaurs are already, the different groups of dinosaurs had already evolved. And as continents move, sometimes they bump into each other and then they come apart again. And there are different kinds of dinosaurs in different parts of the world because they did come apart. But we can definitely, just like we can put together a family tree, we can also, we know exactly how the continents moved apart.
What's the significance of B-Rex?
We have a lot of T-Rex skeletons. The first T-Rex skeleton that we really did a sort of an in-depth study of was called the Wankel T-Rex. It is now what we call America's T-Rex. It's on display at the Smithsonian. When we first collected it in 1990, I had a graduate student. Her name was Mary Schweitzer, and she was interested in doing some bone histology, but she also was just interested in biomolecules in general. And so she began looking at the Wankel T-Rex and looking at the internal bone structure. And while she was looking at it, she saw structures within the blood vessels that appeared to be some kind of remnant of blood. That's what she wanted to work on for her PhD. I said, prove to me that they're not. And so that was her charge. So she tried to prove to me that these structures that she was seeing had nothing to do with the dinosaur's blood.
So you basically killed her bias, right?
Yes. And she was never able to disprove it.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yes. That work was published. And then in 1999, I undertook what I called the Hell Creek Project, where we were going to go out and look for more T-Rexes, but also look for all, collect everything. Everything we found, we'd collect. We went out into an area that had been collected heavily before we got there. And I was thinking that, the idea of the Hell Creek Project was really to determine what kinds of things were in the Hell Creek Formation. And I thought by going to a place that had already been heavily collected, everything we found would just add to an ever-growing body of information. I expected to find a lot of duck-billed dinosaurs and triceratops, which were already well known there. Mm-hmm. And we ended up finding a whole bunch of T-Rexes, which was very surprising. One of them was the specimen called B-Rex. And B-Rex was special because it was under 1,000 cubic yards of rock. I mean, it was really hard to get to. But because it was under 1,000 cubic yards of rock, it was, the preservation was excellent. It had been preserved over a lot of time, and groundwater hadn't gotten to it. And so while we were attempting to get the leg bones out, our helicopter wasn't able to lift the jacket that the leg bones were in, and we had to take it apart. We had to actually break the bones in two. And when we did that, it exposed the internal structures, and we salvaged some of that and gave it to Mary Schweitzer to look at. And she was able to not only find the same structures she had found in the Wankel T-Rex, but she was able to find evidence of proteins and soft tissues and a whole bunch of things that we had not seen before. And so it turned out to be certainly one of the best dinosaur discoveries ever because of what it produced.
I like how calm you are when you say that. When that was happening, did she phone you saying like, "Guess what I found"?
Yeah, she stayed in contact with me. Yes.
What was your reaction, and did she show you, like, walk me through this whole thing?
Like I said, I mean, the most surprising part of it all came when we were when she was studying the Wankel T-Rex.
Hmm.
I mean, we saw things that nobody had ever seen before. And so when B-Rex was opened and good samples of soft tissue were found, it was surprising. We certainly didn't expect it. But on the other hand, after having seen things inside those vessels already in the bone, it wasn't shocking. Finding pieces of protein, that was, again, very interesting, but not shocking. I mean, we were pretty much prepared for it. Although the problem is that when Mary was working on the things on the Wankel T-Rex, people were so skeptical of it, she couldn't get it published. She didn't really get it published until B-Rex came out. And then people realized that, it might actually be real.
Was it B-Rex where she saw something resembling red blood cells?
No, that was the Wankel T-Rex. That was what I was talking about. Yeah, that was the first study. But people, were so skeptical of that. They just didn't believe it. And she had a really hard time getting the work published. But like I say, the B-Rex then was preserved so well, and the blood vessels came out so beautiful that people just couldn't argue with it anymore. I mean, they still do. A lot of people say it's bacteria or bacterial slime, or I don't know. They have all sorts of things, but we've pretty much demonstrated now that is not true. They are biological entities of the dinosaur itself.
So that soft tissue is basically 65 million years old.
66 million years old, yes.
Yeah, plus minus 1 million. Come on.
68, I think, is where we have it sitting right now. Yeah.
How was it able to preserve? Is it because of all this stone? Is it how it preserved itself?
I think what most people don't realize, when you think of soft tissue, you think it's like something different, right? I mean, but everything, it's all molecules, right? I mean, whether it's molecules of minerals or molecules of biological tissues, it's still molecules. And the thing is that proteins or even DNA, I mean, different molecules have different attributes that either sometimes they break down quickly, and in other words, come apart easily, and sometimes they don't. For the most part, soft tissues are biological structures that are fed on by bacteria, right? And so when we die, we're laying there, out there in the field somewhere, and as our corpse begins to rot, the rotting is bacteria feeding on us. I mean, that's what's happening. If the bacteria wasn't there to feed on us and no other animals fed on us, our biological tissues would last a lot longer. The molecules have to start breaking down. And, DNA breaks down quickly because the nucleus of a cell actually holds it together. And after the cell dies, then there's really nothing to hold the DNA molecule together, because it's not held together very well in the first place. Like I say, some molecules, elastin and keratin and things like that, appear to last quite a while, like millions of years. And as long as the bacteria didn't get in there to devour it, there's nothing to stop it from preserving. Plus the fact that we think that iron itself might be kind of a fixative. And in those blood vessels are the remnants of blood cells that have iron in them, right? Heme. So we think that the heme, the iron constitute, might have actually helped fix the elastin and other proteins.
Heme is related to hemoglobin, right? Somehow.
Heme is the biological iron, right? Hemoglobin, right? So it's iron.
Got it. And regarding DNA, so this basically means there are very slim chance, if at all, that we'll ever find DNA. We'll be able to extract DNA of dinosaur, unless it's a movie.
Yes. Although Mary and another one of my doctoral students, Alida Bayul, have both found, at least they've stained for DNA in some of the bones under extremely clean conditions, and there's a suggestion that DNA is there. There's just not enough to replicate.
Wow, interesting. When did that happen?
2020.
So what about the dinosaurs that possibly can be somewhere in the ice?
There was no ice on Earth when the dinosaurs went extinct.
Oh, okay.
And it certainly didn't remain, even if there was a little bit of it. Mammoth elephants, they went extinct 8,000 years ago when there was ice.
That's why. Okay. Yeah, too bad. I wish there was a little more ice so we can see those.
Yeah, as far as we can tell, the world was pretty much ice-free over a lot of the time dinosaurs were on Earth. There might have been a ice cap on the North Pole, but that's about it.
In one of your speeches, I think you mentioned that your favorite dinosaur is Maiasaura.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, it was the first dinosaur I named. And and besides that, it's the dinosaur we have the most fossils for. We've got remains of thousands of skeletons. We've got their embryos, we've got their eggs, we've got babies, juveniles, all different growth stages. We have their skin impressions, we have their footprints, we have their fossilized feces. We know their population structure. It's the dinosaur we know the most about.
And just to take a step back, walk me through how that happened, because you were involved in discovery of those, right? And what was the whole project like, and what's the significance of you finding nests of dinosaurs and embryos?
Well, first off, you have to realize that I'm dyslexic and I didn't do well in college. I flunked out. When I was at Princeton working as a technician, I was given permission to do research. One day out of the week, I could do research. And it was in 1975, Peter Dodson, a paleontologist who had worked for John Ostrom, had gotten his PhD from John Ostrom, had just gotten a job at Penn, University of Pennsylvania. And he had just published a paper showing that some small duckbill dinosaurs that people had thought were just small adults were actually juveniles, were actually subadult and juvenile dinosaurs. And I had always been fascinated by, the potential of baby dinosaurs and juvenile dinosaurs. And when Peter Dodson, came to this conclusion that some of these small dinosaurs were actually juveniles, I realized that a lot of them had actually been found in Montana, very close to where I was born and raised. And so one of the things that, if you sort of look at my record of publications over time, you'll see that I don't want it to sound arrogant, but I do a lot of things that other people don't do. And the reason is because reading is so difficult for me. So, as I tell my students, if you do it first, you don't have to read anything. And so juvenile dinosaurs seemed like the perfect thing to work on. So I started, going to the museums like the Smithsonian and the American Museum and looking at the juvenile dinosaurs and the babies that had been found in Mongolia. They were very rare. There hardly was any. But I was looking at those, and then in 1977, I was working at Princeton, got a chance to go on vacation. So I went back to my home state. I went back to the place where I'd found my first dinosaur bone, And while I was there, I found a dinosaur egg. And it was one of the first dinosaur eggs found in the Western Hemisphere.
And how does the dinosaur egg look? Does it look like a stone or it looks like egg?
It was a bunch of broken pieces.
Mm.
I didn't know for sure that it was an egg. I took it back to Princeton, and a mammal paleontologist who had worked at Princeton before I had gotten there had actually been in Montana, in a different place, in different southeastern Montana, and he had found some eggshell fragments, and he published them in the journal Science in 1931. And they were the first dinosaur remains found since the Mongolian stuff. No one thought much about that, I guess. Anyway, when I found this egg, it was crushed, it was flattened. At first, I thought it was a fossil turtle, a little turtle. And I took it back to Princeton and compared it to the stuff that was there. And it compared with the eggshell fragments that this other paleontologist had found back in 1930. And so I knew I had a dinosaur egg, and it was from the Two Medicine Formation. And I had been also looking at some other skeletons that had been found that were in the Princeton collection, collected by another mammal paleontologist who ironically had gotten his degree at the University of Montana back in 1900. And he had worked for Princeton just a very short period of time, but that's where he sent his skeletons. So Princeton had some dinosaur skeletons from Montana. It also had some eggshell fragments, dinosaur eggshell fragments from Montana. And there I was, first dinosaur paleontologist of sorts to work at Princeton. And so I was, beside myself that I had all this stuff from Montana. And the cool thing about the dinosaurs that were there, they were juvenile. They were the size of the animals that Peter Dodson had talked about in his paper. And so I figured if I went back to Montana, in 1978, I thought if I went back, I could find juvenile dinosaurs. All I needed to do is go back to the site where these dinosaur skeletons that were at the Princeton collection were found. It was in central Montana. And I went back there. My friend Bob Mackel and I went there. And we wandered all over the place. It was raining. We got stuck. It was a horrible mess. We had a terrible time. And we didn't find the site. We couldn't find where the skeletons had been found.
You don't go into the random field, right? You go where these previous skeletons were.
Right.
Got it.
Right. And Bob Mackel was then at that time teaching high school in northern Montana. And he and another friend had found a place where you could find fossil mammals. We went back to that area. It's a place you can find dinosaur bones too. But there was this paleontologist from California, from Berkeley, who wanted to study the fossil mammals that Bob had found and his friend had found near where he taught. And so that guy had come out to Montana to see the site where these primitive fossil mammals were found. And while he was there, Bob and I were sort of hanging around, and he said, this guy named Bill Clemens, who was from Berkeley, said, by the way, there's the state of Montana called me and told me that there was this woman in Western Montana that had found a dinosaur and she wants it identified. And Bob and I said, well, we can, we're just driving around. We'll go over there and identify her dinosaur for her. And so we did. We went over and went to a rock shop and identified the dinosaur that this woman had. And she had a whole bunch of other bones in her rock shop. And so we identified all those for her as well. And as we were walking out the door, she said, by the way, do you know what these things are? And she held out her hand, and in her hand were baby dinosaur bones. The smallest baby dinosaurs I had ever seen in my life.
Did you figure out that it's baby dinosaurs' bones immediately, or you kind of had to?
I knew exactly what they were. Yes.
How do you know that?
That's what I had been hoping to find.
Biases.
I had been studying juvenile dinosaurs I had looked at all the baby dinosaur bones that had been found in Mongolia. I'd seen the baby dinosaur bones that had been found in Canada. I knew what I was looking at. I mean, I said it right there. I said, those are baby duckbill dinosaur bones. And she said, well, I have more of them. And she walks over to her house and she had a whole card table covered with them. I almost passed out. It was just shocking to me.
Even
And,
I'm excited now. I don't know why.
and I said, these are really, really important. I said, I'd really like to know where they came from. I'd like to see where they came from. And she says, well, I'm busy today, but I'll get a hold of the ranchers and take you out there if I can in a couple of weeks. And so Bob and I said, that'd be great. She handed me the can of bones. She piled all the bones in a can and she said, here, you can have them. And I was like, whoa. Anyway, we took them and I was just blown away. I mean, I didn't know what to think. I took them to a camp where a friend of mine was collecting fossil fish. We took them there and Bob and I got a couple of 6-packs of beer and we sat around the campfire and drank beer and talked about how wonderful it was that we finally found baby dinosaurs. And then a couple of weeks later, Marion Brandvold, the woman who had found these things, took us to the site, and there were thousands of baby bones laying all over the surface of the ground.
You actually could see them.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
without even digging?
It didn't need to dig.
What the hell?
We then went and got permission from the landowner to excavate it. They gave us permission, and Bob and I excavated. And as we were excavating, we realized that we were excavating into the ground a bowl-shaped depression full of baby dinosaurs. It was a nest, and it had 15 baby dinosaurs in it. We took those out, and right nearby, the daughter-in-law of the woman who had found them, a woman named Lori, had found a part of a skull, and they had tried to excavate it, and unfortunately they'd broken it up. They weren't sure. They didn't really have the tools to excavate anything, and they'd kind of broken it up, and they showed it to me and they said, we're sorry, but there was probably something here. And so Bob and I excavated that spot as well, and we found the skull of what we would later name Maiasaura, and the babies we associate with the adult. So we found an adult skull and 15 babies. We took those out of the ground, excavated them, took them back to the town where Bob lived, and we started cleaning him up. And in that time, a friend of ours who had come out and seen the baby site was looking around that area, and she found a second nest. And the second nest had 7 babies in it, and they were smaller than the first nest. And so, by then we had 2 nests of baby dinosaurs and an adult. I mean, it was extraordinary. A brand new species of dinosaur. The first evidence that dinosaurs were cared for in nests. The first evidence that there was parental care.
So prior to that, what did we believe? That there was no parental instincts at all?
People had just thought that the dinosaurs were good reptiles, that they dug a hole, laid their eggs, and just left them. And the babies hatched out just like turtles do.
Yeah, but apparently they actually would bring them food and feeding them, right?
Yep.
In one of the other interviews of yours, you're showing 2 different bones of one species. One is very tiny, the other one was larger. The difference between them was a year or something. And you suggested that the fact that they were growing so fast meant that this species couldn't walk.
It wasn't because they were growing so fast. It was we actually cut into the bone and were able to determine that the ends of the bones, even though they looked like they were made of bone, were actually made of cartilage. And so we know that the babies could not walk. So they were nest bound, which is the indication that they were cared for and brought food.
It's also Maiasaura, right?
Yes.
And why Maiasaura? What did the name come from?
It means good mother.
Uh, was it tempting to name it after yourself? Because I know that later on there was few species were named after you.
Well, you can't name something after yourself.
Oh, come on. They do it with stars all the time.
Well, I'm sure they do, but you can't do it in biology. We named it after the people who owned the ranch. Maiasaura peoplesorum. People that owned the ranch or the Peebles family.
And the fact that it was a completely new species, what did it do to the field of paleontology?
Nothing really. I mean, it was a new kind of dinosaur.
Well, I thought this was going to change the world. Okay, it didn't.
A couple of friends of mine and I just named a new dinosaur just last week.
Is it completely new species as well, or is it kind of similar to?
Yep.
How did you name it?
Well, we called it Platytholus clemensi after Bill Clemens, the guy that suggested I go identify this dinosaur.
Oh, interesting. Besides the fact that you discovered a new species, new dinosaur type, right? You also disproved a bunch, right?
Right.
Can you tell us how that happened?
So when Peter Dodson published his paper showing that some of these small dinosaurs were not adults, that they were juveniles, it showed that the difference was that some dinosaurs had elaborate crests on their heads, and that the crest didn't develop until they were almost full grown, which is also true in birds. Birds that have crests on top of their heads, the crest usually doesn't develop until after the bird is almost full grown. And so since the skull grows and is almost adult size before the crest on its head starts to growing, people thought that they were different dinosaurs, that they were a different species. That was what Peter Dodson originally found. That was 1975. And then people sort of forgot that. And they started naming, a whole bunch more animals. In the 2000s and 1990s and 2000s, I realized that, people were starting to name way too many dinosaurs, and they had kind of forgotten what Peter Dodson had said and what he published. And so we were looking at some of the bone-headed dinosaurs, and there were 3 species of dome-headed dinosaurs, all from the Hell Creek Formation. One formation, this is where T-Rex comes from, and Triceratops and so forth. There was Pachycephalosaurus, Stygimoloch, and Dracorex, 3 dinosaurs that everybody knew were related to one another, but they looked really different from one another. And so they give them different names. All we had to do was just line them up. And you could see that Dracorex was the littlest one, and Stygimoloch was the middle-sized one, and Pachycephalosaurus was the biggest one. And Pachycephalosaurus has a big dome on its head. Stygimoloch has a little dome on its head with big spikes sticking out the back. And Dracorex has no dome on it and spikes sticking out the back. And what we did was we cut into the bone and were able to determine that Dracorex was a juvenile, and Stygimoloch was almost full grown, but the dome was still growing really fast. Pachycephalosaurus was an adult. So it was really easy to hypothesize that it was a growth series rather than 3 different species.
And you determine it by the density of bones, right? Structure.
Well, not the density, really. It has a lot to do with bone structure. And bone, as it develops, goes through a lot of different modes. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen to it. So you can really easily tell a juvenile from an adult. One of my students back in the 1980s determined that.
Did he pass your class?
Yes, she did.
Okay, good. She did. And also, is it T-Rexes who loses the number of teeth as they grow?
Yes.
And how did you determine that?
Just by taking a bunch of T-Rexes of different sizes and lining them up.
And disproving another species.
Right.
Basically, you discovered several new species of dinosaurs. You disproved several, so your net contribution is like neutral, right?
I was saying that just recently. When I did that TED Talk in 2011, suggesting that we would probably find more dinosaurs to sink. Since then, I've named more dinosaurs than I've sunk. So it backfired.
Dino-chicken. What's this project is about?
Well, the Dino-chicken project was started back in 2009 when a friend of mine named Hans Larsen was thinking about trying to determine what evolutionary steps had to progress in order to go from dinosaurs to birds. And he was interested in the genetic pathway. So he and I got to talking, and I said, if we could determine that, if we can determine the genetic pathway, it might be possible to reverse it. If there are atavistic genes, ancestral genes that have actually been turned off during the course of evolution, we might be able to just turn them back on and create a dinosaur-like animal. And he said, that's potentially possible. And so I published a book about that, How to Build a Dinosaur. And most people thought it was ludicrous and crazy and thought that I was just trying to get it to attract attention to myself, or I don't know, whatever, something like that. And then I started looking for people to help out. And I got some money from George Lucas, the Star Wars guy.
Yep.
I had the capability of building a lab to work on this stuff. And so I started looking for people with a PhD in developmental biology and genetics. And I was having a really hard time because everybody they just thought it was a stupid idea. And so I had a really hard time. People said it would be a death knell for anybody that worked on the project. And that was in 2011. And by 2012, I found a couple of women. One, Dana Rashid, got her PhD at the University of California, Davis, and another one, Anne Beben, got her PhD in France. And they came and they started working on the project. And so we set up a developmental biology lab and started looking for atavistic genes. Shortly after that, a lab at Yale University published some information on altering the head of a bird to look more like a dinosaur. Even though everybody thought it was a stupid idea, all of a sudden,
It worked.
Yale University was working on something similar. So then everybody realized, maybe it wasn't a stupid idea. And so we continued. We published a few papers looking at all sorts of avenues. I mean, we were looking for atavistic genes, basically. The Yale group had found one, and there was another fellow by the name of Matthew Harris who had determined that you could actually get teeth to start growing in a chicken using a mutant called telpid chicken. And so, it seemed like proof of concept. And we continued at it for several years, and we learned an awful lot about, we were actually looking at the tail. We're trying to figure out how to make a long tail. And we're trying to figure out how the tail developed, how it would have gone from being a long tail like we see in Archaeopteryx down to a really short tail like we see in modern birds. Like I say, at first we thought it was an atavistic gene. And the reason that this project has taken so long is it took so long to figure out that some of these characteristics that we were trying to do away with were not atavistic at all. They were caused by a completely different thing. And we just published this research just last week.
Oh, wow.
Basically what happens is the tail reduces, and then a lot of the tail is actually incorporated in the pelvis. The pelvis becomes this very complex structure, and it incorporates some of the tail vertebrae. And then other group of tail vertebrae fuse together to form a thing called a pygostyle, which is the bony structure that on their tail that they move to actually control flight.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a rudder. What we've discovered is that the bone fusion, both in the pygostyle and in the pelvis, what fused all this stuff together is a process that involves the immune system. And it's the first time that that we've discovered the immune system actually having been co-opted in a process, in an evolutionary process. In other words, the immune system is usually thought of as something that, that kicks on to fix something like a broken leg or trying to solve a disease for us. The thing is that what we realized is that the immune system was actually co-opted through evolution, through selection, and actually fuses together these bones to make the pygostyle and the pelvis. And we know we can use steroids to actually stop the fusion events from happening. So we can make a bird with a long tail.
Oh, so you can now.
Yes.
Interesting.
We could do that. Yeah.
So basically, you're gonna shut down the immune response, and it should let the tail grow. Yeah. Interesting. Wow. The reason why you want that tail to grow is just for the sake of seeing that you're capable of doing it, not because this new Dino-chicken needs a tail, right?
Well, if I were going to make a Dino-chicken, I'd want it to have a long tail.
Yeah. I was thinking about from perspective of like when this Dino-chicken is running around, it doesn't necessarily need this tail, right? It's
doesn't need it, but if you're going to make a Dino-chicken,
yeah,
if you're going to alter its head and you're going to alter its arms and its wings to make arms, and you're going to do all of this other stuff, you might as well give it a long tail.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But if this Dino-chicken breed, they just gonna have regular chicken.
Yes. Yeah. These experiments are done by switching genes in an egg. You're just doing it one at a time.
One day in like in 90s, you got a call from Steven Spielberg.
Yes.
And do you remember that call? How did it go?
Well, it came from a woman named Lotta Ryan, who is Steven's assistant. She said, "My name is Lotta Ryan, and I'm calling for Steven Spielberg. And Steven wants to know if you would consider working on the movie Jurassic Park as the scientific advisor."
The name of the movie already kind of told you what it's going to be about, right?
Yes. A friend of mine had sent me an email when the book came out and said, "Jack, you're in a book." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You're in a book about dinosaurs." And I said, "I hope I don't get eaten." Said, "No, you didn't get eaten."
Did you know who Steven Spielberg was back then, or yes. Not yet? Okay. So you obviously said like, yeah, sure.
I said, I have a full-time job. What would this entail? And she said, just come to the set once in a while and talk to some people, and it won't take too much of your time.
And how the process worked? Like you would go there and you would advise whether this dinosaurs looked realistic, whatever you meant by realistic back then.
I went down, I worked with the people that I met everybody. I met the set director. They were putting together the storyboards at the time. The set director actually came to Montana, wanted to see some of the areas where we dig. I went and talked to Stan Winston and his group. They were the ones making the animatronics. I worked with the model makers and, talked about what dinosaurs should look like. I was working with the claymation people because when we were first going to make it, we didn't have computer graphics. So I was working with the people that were going to do the claymation.
What's claymation? Sorry.
They take clay models and move them.
Okay.
Take a picture of them. So we thought we were going to have to do claymation first. I talked to Sam Neill about, what a paleontologist is, what his character would be like. Steven had me go to dinner with him and spend some time with him so he'd know who he was portraying, I guess. Who knows what.
Sam Neill is Alan Grant, right, in the movie, who was basically based. Exactly. Is it loosely based on you, or it's actually you? The similarities is this egg mounting thing, right? What else? Got it. Okay.
Yeah, well, he's a paleontologist from the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah, okay, close enough. And you look a little different. Like, what else? What did you teach him? Like, did you tell him like special, I don't know, jargon he's supposed to use? No. Maybe it's like special handshake. It
was all just, there was nothing really. We just met and spent some time together, and
yeah.
My job was to make sure the dinosaurs looked real and that the actors pronounced their words correctly.
And did they look real to you?
Well, they look pretty good. I wanted them to be more colorful, and I wanted them to be feathered, but feathering wasn't possible. The technology just wasn't there. We couldn't do it. Even when they were able to get computer graphics going, there was no possible way to put feathers on a dinosaur when they were just using, animation or computer graphics for the first time. So, they turned out pretty well for the time. Steven didn't want them colorful because he just didn't think they'd be scary enough.
Well, I gotta tell you, like, the way those dinosaurs look, I think it shaped the understanding of most of the people's view of how dinosaurs should look, right?
Yeah. Nowadays, I have a hard time, convincing people that they should look way different than that. But
yeah.
I mean, because everybody thinks I'm just dead wrong.
Is it discoveries since then that kind of proved that they should look a little different?
I mean, we know that birds are the descendants of dinosaurs, and all the characteristics we think of as being bird-like, we know that their ancestors had to have these characteristics. I mean, birds didn't invent dancing and song and color and all that. They didn't invent all that stuff in the last, 60 million years.
So you think dinosaurs were dancing?
Of course.
Wow, I want to see that.
That's how birds display. How do mammals display? They fight one another, right? I mean, they fight and they crash their heads together. Mammals evolved as nocturnal creatures. Our ancestors lived at the same time as dinosaurs, but they were nocturnal. And so they were colorblind. They didn't have to see color. Their communication was all with pheromones, with sniffing. I mean, that's why modern mammals go around sniffing each other, right? I mean, that's just how it works. And they're not colorful. Modern mammals are not colorful, except in the most derived of them, like primates. Some of the monkeys have colorful butts and colorful faces. But other than that, there's no color in mammals. I mean, other than, orange and gray and brown, and black. I mean, birds and their reptilian ancestors are colorful. I mean, they should be.
How close to the reality is the whole concept of creating this Jurassic Park?
Everything about it is fiction. I mean, no, we don't get DNA from anything that's older than, I don't know, 10,000 years. I mean, it might get little bits and pieces. They're having a hard time cloning an elephant because they don't have enough DNA. All right. I mean, you're still going to have to add some modern elephant. When it comes down to the science, first off, there's not an amber mine at every locality where there was a dinosaur, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about the movie, they're at one amber mine, not 500 amber mines, which you would need if you had 500 different dinosaurs, because all those dinosaurs didn't live together, right? I mean, you have sauropods and allosaurs and T-Rexes and all these dinosaurs. You'd have to go find an amber mine for each one of them. I mean, that part is just totally ridiculous.
In the book, he says that they were buying like thousands of those ambers around the world. So book has like little differences with the movie, clearly. But even then, I obviously understand that.
But even that, I mean, you're going to find an insect that bit a dinosaur, and you're going to find this amber in every single dinosaur site in the world.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I have to. I just now discovered that T-Rexes were dancing and singing. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
But anyway, that part of it's just totally ridiculous. And then the most ridiculous thing is that every time they pull DNA out, they got a dinosaur that we already know about.
Yeah.
Right. And we know that there were hundreds and hundreds of dinosaurs that we don't know about. There were thousands of dinosaurs that we don't know about. But these guys were lucky enough to get just the ones that we all know.
Well, it was great. It was a great movie. Well, and you went back to the Jurassic World as well, right? You will
Yes,
participate in all of them. How was the?
I did a cameo in Jurassic World.
Yeah. I've read it. I didn't see you in the movie.
Well,
I was
it happened so quick, it's hard to see anyway.
how the process of creating Jurassic Park and Jurassic World was different for you as a consultant.
Well, the set is, in the time between Jurassic Park 3
Uh-huh.
and Jurassic World, there was so much time in there. We had gone from analog to digital.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't even know where the camera was. I walked onto set and I couldn't recognize anything. I didn't know who the director was. I couldn't find them. I didn't know where the camera was. I mean, everything was completely different, and there were giant green screens all around.
That's what I want to say. It's kind of sucks, Like I kind of think it's the first one was much more fun, right?
Yeah, it
You would at
was.
least see some creatures there.
Exactly.
One thing I was thinking about, you mentioned that George Lucas gave you money for the project. So
He gave me money. He gave me $1 million and told me to do whatever I wanted with it.
how is it that you made so much money for Spielberg and it's Lucas who gave you money?
Spielberg gave me a lot of money too.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Good. Okay, then it's fair. You've written several books. Wasn't Digging Dinosaurs the first one?
My first book was called Maia, A Dinosaur Grows Up.
So it was about
It was a children's book.
Maiasaura.
Digging Dinosaurs was the first adult book.
I'm guessing you really enjoy writing children's books because it's they illustrate. There's a bunch of illustration there.
If I'm going to write an adult book, I feel like I have a obligation to write a children's book at the same time.
Why is that?
Well, because kids like dinosaurs more than adults do.
True. Yeah, they can name them all.
As they can.
Obviously, it was difficult for you to read, and I didn't even know what dyslexia is until recently. I watched the YouTube video what dyslexic people see when they see the text, and it looked pretty miserable to me. How was it for you to be in this field, in this scientific field with dyslexia? How did you overcome it?
I didn't overcome it.
But like you just struggle through text, or
You don't overcome dyslexia. It's just something that stays with you, and just learn to deal with it. Now, I can write pretty easily. My mother showed me how to type, and I can type pretty fast, and then I can read. It's really, really, really slowly. But the cool thing is now with computers, you can just have your computer read to you.
so that's the way for you to deal with it, right? You have some tools that help you.
Yep.
But as you probably didn't discover you have dyslexia until adulthood, right? Because back then they didn't even know what it is.
No, everybody just thought I was stupid, lazy. My father had been the valedictorian of his class,
Jesus.
and so my father, told everybody, all his friends and my friends, he told everybody that I was spoiled and lazy.
Wow, that sucked. Sorry. And did he later learn that you have a condition that doesn't allow you to read?
Um, in 1984, there was a story written about me in Esquire magazine, and it was sort of the first time. So, when the baby dinosaur story broke, it made headlines worldwide. I was above the fold on the New York Times for making the baby dinosaurs, and in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, it happened, pretty fast. And my father, had just thought that paleontology was the worst thing. Why dig in the ground for dinosaurs when you can look for gold, silver, and oil? Something that makes money. He just thought I was lazy, and I flunked out of college 7 times, so that was proof that I was lazy. And then when I got a job at Princeton, I was a technician, and my starting salary was just terrible. But I was at a museum, so I didn't care. And it didn't matter to me how much I was getting paid. I was working at a famous university, and I was working in a museum. So I was as happy as I could be. my father, just he was still telling his friends, well, Jack got a job, but he's lazy. And that's he sooner or later he'll be back to Montana working for me. And then when the baby dinosaurs were found and it made the news all over the place, then my mother says he was pretty silent after that. He didn't really say anything. And then in 1984, I was written up in Esquire magazine as, I don't know, one of the 200 people changing America or something. It was some crazy, it was a weird thing like that. Anyway.
Wow.
And then, after that, he was fine. And then in 1986, I got a MacArthur Fellowship and an Honorary Doctorate. And he came. He didn't go to my high school graduation, but he came for my Honorary Doctorate. He came to the university. So, and then he came out on our dinosaur digs and helped dig after that.
That's crazy that you went through your childhood and youth with your father clearly supporting what you wanted to pursue.
When I look back on it, I don't hold anything against him at all. When I think about it, a lot of people told me I couldn't do a lot of things, and I always pushed forward. I don't know that I pushed forward to prove them wrong, or I pushed forward just because I'm stubborn. But whatever one it was, I mean, obviously it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt. And when I look back at my life, it was an extraordinary life. It still is.
MacArthur Fellowship was given to geniuses pretty much. So I'm sure you felt pretty good about it.
Well, it's I don't know. I think it's the press that calls it a genius grant or whatever. It's an honor, I mean, it's an honor because, your peers, it's given to you by your peers. So that's pretty cool. But the best thing about it is it comes with a whole bunch of money that you can use.
Yeah.
All sorts of things.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You can use any, they said you can go out and buy yourself a sports car if you want. I went out and bought a pickup truck, a 4-wheel drive pickup truck.
Yeah, he went back to the field to find more dinosaurs. Right. Do you think this diagnosis and the fact that you couldn't read what already was discovered kind of force you to approach the paleontology slightly differently, that differentiate you from the crowd?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at it that way, I certainly, I'm a visual person. So, I look at almost everything different than most people do. I'm a professor now. I teach honor students, and I'm always trying to get them, to be more visual rather than just memorizing a bunch of stuff.
So one question I had for you, like, you obviously had fascinating life. When I Googled most famous paleontologists, you were on the list, and you're one of the few who are still around. Like Darwin. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm like, okay, he's there with Darwin and other guys. What advice would you give to young people, and maybe even to, let's say, 15-year-old self?
Follow your dreams. I tell everybody that, and what I mean by that is, if there's something you really want to do, just do it. Don't wait for somebody to tell you that you should or you could. Do it. My father didn't think paleontology was worthwhile doing, and it's possible that it could have turned out that way. And I hear kids always say, well, could I be a paleontologist? And I say, well, what are you interested in? Well, how much does it pay? Well, You shouldn't, if you want to be a paleontologist, you shouldn't worry about how much you're going to get paid. You should, think about what you're going to find. Just it's hard to overemphasize, the whole fact that if you really have a passion for something, you will. That's the way you will go. I mean, if you wait for other people to, weigh in on it, obviously no one's going to weigh in it like you would if that's what you want to do. I mean, my mother was very supportive of me. My father wasn't, but my mother just thought, that's what he wants to be. Let him be that. And that was fine. I mean, that's great. My teachers, some of my teachers, my science teacher in high school, I mean, here I was flunking science and winning science fairs. So I won 3 science fairs. My sophomore, junior, and senior years, I won the science fair. All 3 years I won. And at the same time, I was getting D's in science, F's in English. But the difference was you go to school, they give you a certain amount of time to do something. And if you don't read very fast or you don't read at all, there's no possible way to get it done in a certain amount of time. But a science project, you got a whole year to do. Or even, my senior science project was a paleontology exhibit on dinosaurs. And I spent all 3 years working on it. I mean, it was an incredible project. And when I won it, the University of Montana, where they judged the fair, invited me to come to college there. They didn't know I was going to almost flunk out of high school, but they invited me to come to college, and that's where I went to college. And I majored in geology, and I was there after the first semester, they put me on academic probation because I hadn't passed one single class. And then including paleontology. And then at the end of the second semester, I flunked out. And I was drafted, and I went to the Marine Corps and went to Vietnam. Came back from Vietnam, went right back to college. I said, I'm back. I want to try again. So at the end of the first semester back, I was on academic probation. At the end of the second semester, I flunked out again. And I would do that. I finally talked one of my professors into writing a letter to the dean and saying, we don't know what's wrong with him, but he really likes paleontology, wants to be a paleontologist. Let's just let him take some classes. Doesn't even have to take them for credit. Just let him take some. And when he's done, he'll just go see if he can get a job as a technician. This is what I did. I went for 14 semesters for 7 years. And I took all of the classes I could take in geology and zoology. And I learned a lot, but I didn't learn enough in any one of those classes to pass it. But at the end, I had learned how to prepare fossils. I learned how to curate them. I worked in the little museum at the University of Montana. The director of the museum showed me how to curate and prepare. And so I learned all about museums. And I looked at every single fossil in there. I mean, I knew them. I knew every single piece in the museum. I knew what it was. I could identify anything. And so when I got a job at Princeton, I got a job as a technician because I was really good at it. And I could curate as well. And so Don Baird, the guy that hired me at Princeton, was happy to hire somebody that could actually help him curate and prepare fossils. And so I was there. I was hired in 1975. And 3 years later, I found the baby dinosaurs. And so when the baby dinosaurs were found, it was making headlines all over the place. I was trying to get, I needed grant money, but I couldn't write a grant because I didn't have any degree. I didn't even have a bachelor's degree, didn't have anything. And so I wrote to the Rainier Brewing Company and asked them if I could get 10,000, if they would give me $10,000. And I told them that I would advertise the Rainier beer. And they offered to give me $10,000. And then Princeton said, no, you can't take money from the Rainier Brewing Company. We'll give you the $10,000. And so with that money, I went out, and that next year we found dinosaur eggs, lots of them. I mean, and they were the first dinosaur egg clutches. And then, I mean, and then I published my first paper in Nature, and that's, the top journal in the world. And so the National Science Foundation said, came to Princeton and said, if you let him write a grant, we'll give you money. Princeton reluctantly allowed me to write a grant, but had somebody else sign it. And then I got the money, and with that money, Princeton also gave me a room for my office, and they gave me a lab where I could hire my own preparator. And then they promoted me to research scientist. I wasn't a preparator. I wasn't a technician anymore. I was a research scientist. And then in 1982, Montana State University offered me a job as curator of paleontology. So I left Princeton, went to Montana State University, where I became the curator of paleontology. The National Science Foundation said that they would accept grant proposals from me. And I started writing grant proposals and getting them, and built a dinosaur research program at Montana State University, where I stayed for 34 years.
And it's all because you really wanted to do it. That's fascinating.
Because I really wanted to do it. And I never looked back. People kept saying, you can't teach classes. Went to Montana State University. They said, all right, well, you're the curator, but you don't have a PhD, so you can't have students. You can't teach classes. And I said, okay, that's all right. I don't mind. Students started coming and saying, we'd really like to work with Jack Horner. And so finally, they reluctantly let me have some students. And I went out and got money for them. And I had 12 doctoral students that have all gone on to become famous in their own rights, like Mary Schweitzer and many others. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. Pretty hard to complain about a life like this.